back in, God, it must be 2021 now. Rick and I were in Austin, Texas doing a fundraiser. It was a friend raiser, whatever. And we were taking questions. And there was a woman who'd run for Congress in Central Texas as a Democrat, which is, that's tough sledding. And she said, you guys should have taken some of that money that you raised in 2020 and helped me turn out indigent Democratic voters in Central Texas. Now, this is a very niche population. I don't know how many indigent voters there are in McLennan County, Texas, right, Waco, but there can't be that many. And I said, I have to be honest with you, ma'am. That's the Democratic Party's job. Not my job, not our job. And that's the one thing I had seen is, and you mentioned this in the context of Barack Obama, and I think this is also and I'm just thinking about this on the fly, Tina, is where because of all of the assets that the conservative movement in this country has at its disposal, they're able to take advantage of things. They took advantage of the rage, and I do believe it was rage on the part of many white Americans when they saw Barack Obama elected president. And Trump and the birth certificate and Kenya and socialism and everything else, to use that as a spark that then allowed them to go swoop up, I think you said 17 governorships, thousands of legislative seats, hundreds of, state Senate seats, statewide offices everywhere. So Barack Obama is sitting in the White House. The Democrats, for a time, remember when he first took office, as you know, around the time of Obamacare, this is when you would have been in college, right? And the Tea Party and everything else. They had the House, the White House, and 60 seats in the Senate, right? And 2 years later, boom, right? Gone. But from what I can see, again, I say this less as a criticism because it's not worth criticizing anymore, but as an observer is, the Democratic Party, for my part, what's concerning and what has not allowed them to compete effectively in too many ways is they thought if we elect the president, we've got everything.
Absolutely. They got a little too high on their executive action supply.
Right. And this belief, as we saw now with the Dobbs decision of now almost 2 years ago, that somehow like Roe v. Wade would never be overturned. The Supreme Court would never flip. Mitch McConnell would never hold open a Supreme Court seat, right? Like all of the things that Republicans did because they understood and they understand the nature of power. I feel like Democrats either A, still to this day don't understand, or B, were sort of fundamentally uncomfortable with. Whereas Republicans are like, if you're going to let us do it, we're going to do it. And even to this moment, I feel like, Tina, people still underestimate what these people can and will do.
Right. I had noticed a weird trend throughout my early years on the right that sort of alarmed me the moment I stepped outside and watched it grow further and further. Like, there's an ex-boyfriend I discuss in the book. He ends up becoming a notorious internet troll. But the thing is like, when you look at him from college, he was sort of exhibiting the same behavior. At one point, I believe he outed the student body president to his parents back home in Missouri simply because he did not like the way the budget was being spent. And I think in normal world, that would be considered rather sociopathic. But not only was he rewarded for it, that he became an actual Claremont Institute fellow. He started getting to know Peter Thiel. He started getting his work retweeted by Trump. And the funny thing is, I think that the immune system that conservatism once had for itself to keep people like Chuck and his allies out of the driver's seat just started failing. And I think it was because of the internet. Let's
bring, conservatism and mass media together. You go back to Father Coughlin.
Rush Limbaugh.
And then I was going to use Rush was my next thing, which was both basically radio, but radio was for a mass audience, right? And I mean, how many hours a day do people we all know that we're listening, did they tune into Rush religiously? And whatever it was he said came out the other end. And your book said something that I read someplace else, and I experienced this personally now 4 years ago. It's hard to believe. When I was in New Hampshire, and there was the day before the New Hampshire primary in 2020, and Trump was doing a rally there. And I went, and I was dressed like this, so I could sort of still code Republican, right? And I'm asking questions of people, and whether or not it was the young kids who'd driven over from Vermont, the middle-aged couple, the group of old people, they all, why are you here? Why do you support Trump? And they all said the same thing, as if they'd all gotten the talking points in their email that morning. And I don't think it was just a reminder, even to this day, Tina, how effective and efficient that web of communication, starting from the likes of Rush, we evolve into Fox, we evolve into the Chuck Johnsons of the world and the Daily Callers of the world, we evolve into Tucker, right? And now, like, when Tucker was still on the air, as you know, like, he'd get, let's say, 3 million people a night. Was that what he was getting? But how many more Americans saw, to your point, saw what he was saying, the highlights of what he was saying every night, either because of his Twitter feed, because of Fox's Twitter feed, or because of the massive machine of conservative online people, whether or not they were paid or unpaid, that pushed all of that stuff further and further and deeper into the countryside.
That is the infinite fringe, dude. That is a phrase I came up with, and I'm very proud of it. But yeah, like the idea that Tucker Carlson could suddenly become not influential because he got kicked out of Fox is sort of ridiculous, I think. Someone pointed out to me in his orbit after he got fired that Tucker's online following is so massive. His monologues on YouTube alone would get 1 million views a pop just on a regular basis.
So now that's 4 million people.
Yeah, exactly. And and then the thing that I believe Fox and a bunch of media observers did not understand about Tucker was that he did not care about getting a $40 million payout. Like, that was irrelevant to him. He would rather be in a room with just like a camera and a microphone live streaming to the world, even if it was on like an iPhone 3.
As is evidenced by his recent conversation with the internet troll Cat Turd.
Good old Cat Turd.
Right. But that's real. Yeah. Like, that's a real thing.
Yeah, exactly. And the moment that he saw his contract, and the contract said, you cannot do anything else until December 2024 after the election, he was like, I'm not doing that. Screw these guys. I'm going to figure out every single way I can around it, which was why his the first thing he needed to do was get his name back into the public consciousness as quickly as possible. So he had control over his Twitter feed legally, and so he started working there. And then second, he did not strike a deal with Elon Musk. That was the thing everyone thought he was going to do. And he was like, nope, I'm just going to be a content creator. And whatever revenue comes in through here, it's the revenue that comes in through here. I'm not being exclusive on this platform, but I am just going to keep talking and you cannot stop me. And frankly, Fox has not, which is a fundamental thing that they definitely overlooked, I thought.
Well, because, there's the what's called the Streisand effect, right? Which is Barbra Streisand famously got mad at some guy for taking pictures of the beach in front of her house, which is in California, public property. She made a big thing about it. And then it became, everybody now knows what beach Barbra Streisand's house is on in Malibu or wherever it was, right? It became a much bigger thing.
Origin of the phrase.
Yes. If she had just been annoyed and walked back into her house and closed the door and finished her coffee, nobody ever would have cared about it again. But if they go sue Tucker now, right? That's the greatest thing in the world that could ever happen to him.
Oh, exactly. Absolutely.
Right? Because he would be able to say, I told you. I was out there as the truth teller. Rupert and Lachlan and the rest of them are just a bunch of rhinos. They hate you. They hate me. They hate the truth. And that's why I think they have left him alone, because they're like, well, what are we going to do now? Yeah, I guess we could bankrupt him. But at that point, people would send him millions of dollars. And you know as well as I do that there's some conservative out there, whether or not it's Richard Uline or somebody else, who would pay his legal bills.
Yeah, the big issue, just going back to Tucker, though, is I don't think he particularly cares about like consequences as long as he's able to really hold that grudge against someone who's wronged him. Like, I'm not quite sure how he's going to take this book or whatever I'm saying about him publicly, but I remember pretty distinctly, and this was literally the first time we ever spoke. I'm a 22-year-old nothing who's in his office, and he learns where I went to high school and then just starts going into this rant about how much he hated my high school principal. And I'm like, why is this? This is so funny. And he goes, yeah, it's because he was hitting on my girlfriend at the time. And this is a grown man telling me this decades after it happened. And it's also the first thing he ever told me. And then like a decade later, I decided to interview him for the book while he's still at Fox News. And I decided to ask him about what he believes the state of conservative media is and the state of media overall. And most of the time, I would say like 20% of the time, he's just like ragging on people that he hates, like deeply, deeply hates. Ben Smith is a reptile creature. Ariana Huffington is a narcissistic rich lady. Everyone in DC who hung Black Lives Matter signs on their windows was just more like trying to pamper themselves morally. It was like going to Soul Cycle for them. And I don't doubt that his rage against the establishment I don't doubt that it's genuine. I really think it is. I think he's 100% a dyed-in-the-wool populist. I also think that part of it is motivated by people who criticize him.
And, it's this weird thing, and you see this in Trump, too, right? The guy from Queens who always desperately wanted to be accepted by the people in Manhattan. And when Tucker is younger, right, he's not a populist. He's sort of a nerdy guy with a big moppy head of hair, and he wears the bow tie, right? And he's well thought of. I mean, I remember going to the Gridiron dinner as late as 2017, and he's walking around in white tie and tails, and everybody's still patting him on the back. Hail, fella, well met, right? I guess it's almost 7 years ago now, but he hadn't completely crossed over there. He was still very well accepted in American or DC political and media culture. I don't think he would be now. I also don't think he'd go to that event anymore, given it's the insidery of the insidery.
I don't think he would ever really want to live in Washington or New York.
Well, me neither. But like that in and of himself doesn't make him bad. Aside from all the other things he does.
I mean, first of all, their quote unquote didn't exist back then. But one of the themes I hit on this book, like over and over and over again, is incentive and structures and industries and institutions. And I think Tucker is at his core a magazine writer. And magazine writers, they're journalists, but they're also very witty, incisive, really good at insulting people. Like, if you can't insult someone as a magazine journalist, what are you even doing? And also like more prone to indulging in wacky ideas and conspiracies.
Well, you got a lot of space to fill.
Well, yeah. Well, not just a lot of space to fill, but you're kind of just like, what is this weird story? I'm going to go over here. Wow, you are so crazy. Oh my God, I'm going to write about this. Like, that's an instinct that I still hold, and I was at Vanity Fair for a while.
And you also you typically might have time too, right? A print magazine, maybe, if it's a specific niche topic, you might spend weeks or months on it, right? So you also have plenty of time to sit there in your own head and just sort of cycle through every possible outcome, variable, and everything else. And while you're out there, right, you might pick a few weird, fruits off of this tree and, vegetables off of that plant and, see what sort of mixes it up. And of course, as a magazine writer, it's not a 900-word op-ed. It's not a 1,200-word news story, and it's not a 50,000-word book. So you got to keep people interested.
Yeah. But it is really cool if you can. Not going to lie.
Sure. No, the people that can do it are brilliant at it.
Why, thank you. I don't know if those qualities serve Tucker as a television person, though. And I do sort of think that they go counter to who Tucker was at the beginning. One of the best examples I have of this in the book is, you know, that face that he makes on TV? Like the one that's like kind of like squinty and open mouthed and like nodding all the time. It looks terrible on TV. However, when he's talking to you in person and he looks at you like that, you just suddenly find yourself just like spilling your entire heart to him, because it's like, oh my God, I'm talking to a guy right now who must know everything about my life or else the world will end.